Valerie's going to talk to us about a new project that the CMF is involved in, which is designed to move our industry forward and aggressively position Canadian content in the world marketplace. Valerie, we're all ears.
Aren't we going to miss him? What do you think he's going to do next? Come on, cough it up, Bolin. All right. So, okay, I don't have to be on that, right? You good? Okay, no? Yes? Okay. So thank you, Mr. Bolin, and thanks to the CMPA for this opportunity. And I am going to talk to you for a few minutes about something new, a new concept. So I know you're all tremendously relieved that I'm not going to walk you through the new CMF guidelines, right? Okay. Oh, come on. So before I jump into this, this is a project that Telefilm and the CMF have worked on jointly over this last year. And it's a concept, as Norm said, about given the tremendous talent and content we have in this country, how can we ensure that an audience around the world has access to it? Before I jump in, I've talked to many of you over the course of the year in this room. Tried to catch up with all of you, but as you know, it's a big country. But I just want to thank those who contributed their ideas, their intelligence, and their insight to this synthesis. Now, the tech guy told me that he had some academics up here who couldn't find the green button, so there we go. Okay, so this whole exploration is based on a couple of premises. And one of the premises is we've invested in content in this country for well over 40 years now, if you start with the inception of Telefilm. And our content production capability is quite well developed. We've had success all over the world, but we do fill a relatively small space in terms of the global content marketplace. So here you can see a list of the Oscar-nominated and films that have won. And as we all know, it is no small feat to be nominated for, let alone win an Oscar. And as you can see, in the last 2 years, we've had some great success in our feature film content in that regard. Never mind that, the NFB itself has won 12 Academy Awards and garnered 72 nominations. On the TV side, our series are now sold worldwide. They have been for many years, but it's increasing. And here you can see these stats are a little bit more recent. They don't go back as far as the feature film picture. But here you can see content from Canada that's been sold in the last couple of years to over 200 countries and territories, and that long list of great successful stuff that has been sold up to 100 territories and countries worldwide. Same thing happens for audiences. We know they're on the rise. Our Canadian audiences to 1 million to 1.4 million viewers, there's the list for you to appreciate. US audiences, that's clear. You've heard a lot about that earlier today. They're on the rise. And European audiences, in terms of one particular project, is there for you to consider. Now, the whole point about this, I think, is we've got some fabulous success. Gone are the days when, what's that wonderful actor's name? Mountie Suit Dog, Due South, Paul Gross, broke down the door of US audiences with that wonderful series all that time ago. This is now happening on a regular basis. So the whole point behind this, it's really time for us to give up our inferiority hangover. Our content stands shoulder to shoulder with content all over the world, and its success is increasingly on the rise. The CMF and Telefilm together invest close to $500 million a year in the development and production of this content. So that's what motivated us to have this discussion. We know that the digital revolution offers us an unprecedented opportunity to maximize the investment in this content. You've heard about that all day today, frightening, good, bad, and indifferent. Television viewing is on the rise, stable, but on the rise in some cases. But increasingly, everybody wants the stuff anywhere, any place, anytime. The last year has seen a shift to a demand for more professionally produced, high-quality, premium content on the internet. Oh God, it's right here in front of me. Why do I keep turning my head? I don't know if at my age I can see it clearly, but I'll do my best. So this project and the discussion we've had this year is an exploration of the ways and means by which Telefilm, the CMF, and the NFB can work with you, the film, television, digital media industry, to more aggressively position this content in the world market. So the overall objective is just to make sure we're there. The Canadian content is a visible choice to expand our audiences, increase the awareness in both feature film, TV, and digital media. The outcome will be compelling content is more available globally. Audiences are engaged, they demand more, they want more, that forces us to create more. Canadians become more aware of the great success we've had. Little sidebar story, I was on a plane a couple of weeks ago, found out I was sitting beside a pharmaceutical rep, and he was so engrossed in Rookie Blue, I didn't want to interrupt him. So when he went to the bathroom, came back, I said, "Do you like the show?" And he was just passionate and addicted to the show and went on at length about the storylines and the characters. And when we talked about it and I asked him what it was that made him so fond of this content and that did he know it was made in Canada, he got very excited and, dare I say, really proud of the fact that he was a Canadian. He wasn't aware this show was Canadian. Clearly, he didn't look at the credits. Guess that tells you, like, logos don't work. But he was immersed in the success of this content and his interest in it. So as more and more Canadians become aware of the success, the economic, cultural benefits in return will come back to Canada. The content will be promoted, visible, celebrated, and positioned. I didn't make notes on this, so I just have to make sure I'm not looking over, missing anything. Okay, so the whole question of this project, there are elements that we're looking at: marketing and promotion, branding, what to do, what not to do to ghettoize the content as Canadian or not, where to go. The digital strategy will be a huge piece of this. I would say the heart, probably. And it'll be based, its success and ability to move forward will be based on partnerships. In terms of branding, if there was ever a time possibly to brand what we do in this community, it could be now. This is a company that brands the logos of countries around the world in terms of their success rate. And as you can see, in 2006 we were 12th, 2008, 2009 second, and of course, leading up to the Olympics in 2001, Canada was the #1 recognized brand as a country in the world. Now, we're in the world at the moment, everybody's looking to Canada, everybody's looking to our success, our survival of the economic crisis. Europe is still in a bit of a mess. There's questions around where the US economy will go. And what I found interesting about this whole position that Canada has arrived at is just before Christmas, I don't know if any of you saw it, but Maclean's did an article on Canada on top of the world. And it was really reflecting on, given that the world is looking at Canada right now and how we're leaders in many sectors, will we become arrogant like our neighbors to the south, or maintain our humility and kind of our indifference to success? Just the Hudson Bay launched, there was an ad in a few of the newspapers just before Christmas. They just launched a new clothing line, and they were building on the success of what they did with the Olympics, branding Canada first and the clothing line and the Bay second. Tuesday, in the Financial Post, in the finance section, there was a huge headline here called "The Banks Dial Up, Brand Canada." And again, our banks are seen as world leaders, and it was talking about the whole success, the kind of golden place that our banks find themselves in. So we've arrived at an interesting place as a country where the world is looking to us. The world is looking at our success. Well, you all know we have great success in this sector. Potentially, this is a time we should maximize it. This is our current ecosystem. And as you can see, it's kind of messy. It's messy because that's who we are and how we live. We have some really critical components to this. The CRTC obviously regulates a great deal of what goes on in this country, and through that regulatory process, money comes into content financing to the CMF. The Government of Canada plays a critical role in financing our content, to Telefilm, to the NFB, and to the CMF. And once all this content gets made, I think I missed something. Did we talk about that? Yes. Yeah, I guess we did all this. Gee, I'm a lot faster than I thought. All right, back to the slide. Don't you want to see it again? Doesn't it confuse you? Okay. So once all this content gets made, traditionally and still, it goes into the hands of the distributors in this country and the broadcasters, and they take it to market. And we've had some tremendous success with that and some that hasn't been so great. So this idea is, what do we do now? For 40 years, Telefilm has supported, I don't know, Carol's here, I think, I saw her, there she is, 40 feature films every year. The CMF has financed over 2,200 hours of original Canadian content and now digital content every year. That is a tremendous amount of content available. Part of our dilemma in our structure is that once it's aired and broadcast, and once it's gone on to the websites of those broadcasters or distribution companies and done what it can do in the market, and once, importantly, the Canadian content obligations have been met, it kind of tends to disappear. So the question is, how do we know there isn't an audience for all those back issues of Beachcombers, or in fact, Due South? In fact, there's somebody in this room who told me when we were having these discussions that she had an email from a guy, I think it was in Chicago, who'd come across Cold Squad, and he was desperate to find the series and that content, and where could he find it, buy it, or download it? I was sitting on the plane with one of our own broadcasters coming back from NAPTI, and she can't find Jake and the Kid because she wants to air it on her current network today. So we have this vast catalog of content. The concept of watchcanada.ca is using CMF and Telefilm and the NFB as the federal agencies who have some neutrality to potentially leverage the idea. Our shareholder is the public. And by the way, it's the public through their tax base or what they pay to their cable and direct-to-home providers who actually pay for this content in the first place. So if we were to develop a platform by which we would possibly start with the back catalog and launch this stuff internationally for the world to have access to that content, what might it look like? And the NFB, we all know the success of the NFB's work around what they've done in the last few years. And I think Tom, I also saw, and God, these lights are bad. Tom and Deborah and their team at the NFB deserve nothing but tremendous support from us for how they've changed what the NFB is to this country and the world through the work they've done. And by the way, I think many of you know now, you buy a LG Smart TV, the NFB app is right on it. Couldn't be smarter. Did we know Tom Perlmutter was so smart? You're supposed to laugh, Tom, at that. So the point here is, let's use that experience, expertise, and knowledge. The NFB has the experience now to maybe build the back-end infrastructure, to do the transaction management, reporting remittance, push to mobile, connected TV platforms, download to VOD, SVOD, and leverage social channels. Okay, that's all great. And maybe the federal agencies can be the neutrality point to leverage this, look at what the content there is out there, manage it, market and promote it. We know that the guys on the left have all the current stuff, the really interesting stuff that's doing well in the audience. They're never going to give that up in terms of what they've paid for the license and their ability to exhibit it, at least not in the short term. But if we can find a way to use the watchcanada.ca to cross-market Canadian content to the world, if you want to go in and find the first episode of Call Me Fitz, maybe you find it there. If you want the most current episode, we find a way to link you through wherever it's being aired and you connect on it that way. I have to just make a note here of the tremendous success of Elephant in the French market, which was set up by Quebecor and is a dedicated site for feature film in Quebec. And I think they've now digitized and restored and have available online over 1,200 titles. So if you want to see anything in feature film that the Quebec market has produced in the last X number of years, you can get it through Elephant. So this concept is not meant to replace, it's meant to be something that can bring the content to a central focal point, make it available to Canadians and audiences all over the world, either through the back catalog or through the newer content that's connected to the more traditional distribution sources. There's also sites out there like DocSpace, it's a curated doc site, First Weekend Club for feature film. Again, the cross-marketing and linking opportunities, I think, are evident in this. You could cut and dice and slice this platform any way you want. If you wanted to go in and find all the content from Alberta or Ontario, it's also possible to do it that way. So it becomes a screening room, a transactional distribution place. It's non-exclusive. It's potentially a public-private endeavor for television, feature film, and the web. Challenges, there's probably a million. Obviously, resistance to change. Change is the hardest thing we have to do as human beings and citizens, and certainly you face that every day in the environment you're working with. Challenges to the status quo. We've had a very strong system in this country that served us very well. And we've heard lots of opinions over the last 24 hours about whether that's working, whether it will survive, whether it won't. It doesn't really matter. We have an opportunity now to maximize the investment we've made in the content in this country, possibly in a different way. And of course, the cost to secure rights and encode the content for digital distribution are also a potential obstacle. Some of the solutions to those challenges are in partnerships. CMF, Telefilm Canada, the NFB, and all of you listed there. This won't work without the support of the entire industry. So it's a pretty problematic and big concept to think about, because it has to involve the BDUs, it has to involve the broadcasters, distributors, the exhibitors, the provincial governments, everybody who's engaged and involved in the industry, the agencies, etc. There's a million places that it can fail, but there's a few places I think it can succeed. One of the discussions I had that was on the chart that I didn't mention was Cineplex, and I hadn't engaged in that territory for a long time, and I was really surprised at Michael Kennedy's enthusiasm for this idea, because of course they've had to dramatically change their business model over the course of the last few years, because as we know, or maybe some of you don't, the average Canadian citizen goes to 4 feature films a year in a big Cineplex experience. And by the time they get done viewing their romantic comedy, the new action adventure, the biggest kids show, and maybe something else, it's highly unlikely they're going to look for a piece of Canadian content, and especially because with 2% of our screen times, they're not likely to find it anyway. So Michael's enthusiasm for how to connect with this idea, they have 3.2 million subscribers now on their site in terms of how they're marketing feature film and content and how to focus on Canada, he got quite fired up about it. Some of the other partnerships and ideas that have come up, this is the Dutch Media Hub, which, like the CMPA, is a group of producers in Europe, situated in Amsterdam, that got quite frustrated about the lack of the European broadcast community's movement to digital content. So they formed an organization that does all of those things you see on the right-hand side of the chart. And once they do that, they push this content out into the European community for exhibition. So we're having some early discussions with them about what might this look like, what might this mean, and obviously there are some providers in Canada who could do this service as well. The cost analysis hasn't been done on this, but the idea here might be to take 4 or 5 or 6 pieces of Canadian content by which the producers have the rights back to them, and do a pilot with the Dutch Media Hub to host and screen and do the content delivery on this and do the encoding and the transcoding and see what it looks like and see what it costs and see, in fact, if it even works. While I've talked to lots of people in the industry while we're looking at this project, I've had some really interesting conversations with people outside of the industry. Quite fascinating, in fact, helping to try to kind of break the barrier of how we all think about this. Because when you work inside it all the time, it's difficult to think about new ways of doing things. And one of the interesting people I had a long conversation with was a woman by the name of Andrea Shaw, who ran VANOC. She ran the torch relay on the podium for the Olympics. And we got talking about content and Canadian content and what would be the equivalent of that. So here's a fun idea for you to think about. That someday when Canadians all know what we do, we'll take, this is the Via Rail map of the country, remind you of Own the Podium, which by the way, by the time they were done, they had 96% of Canadians be able to be engaged with that torch relay or those events across the country. So we get William Shatner, we get on the old train, take our best talent of that year, stop in selected communities along the way, do kind of what we do often at the CMF when we have our event on the Hill. Canadians want to be engaged with their talent. They love it. When we had the Trailer Park Boys at the Hill that year, you couldn't get the politicians out of the room. If you look at Mr. Moore's success when he hosts the feature films in Ottawa, and yes, it's a rarefied audience, but those 1,700 elected people go back out to the country and talk about what they just saw. So we could maybe someday take our best talent across the country, have a little fun on the train. I know John Barrick would be up for that because it's the old rock and roll model, you know, the Janis Joplin thing. So this idea is currently in discussion. It's not final, clearly. The next steps are still being debated as to where to go. But we wanted to take the opportunity to talk to you about it today. And so let's show you what it might look like.
Get hot, get Not too close to the flame. Wild open space. Talk like an open book. Sign me up. Got no time to take a picture. I'll remember someday all the chances we took. We're so close to something better left unknown. We're so close to something better left unknown. I can feel it in my bones. Give me sympathy after all of this is gone. Who would you rather be? The Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Okay, that's it for me. And I'd encourage you to talk to us as the next year unfolds. Give us your ideas. Lots of obstacles. Help us find the solutions. Thank you.